Hello, 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 hello. Mic test 1 2 1 2. My name is Martine. My pronouns are they, them, and I will be your moderator for this evening's panel, our TGNC and the API community. And so I'm super duper excited for this. This has been in the works for quite a few months now. Thank you and hello to all those that are joining us. And I just wanted to give a second for each one of our panelists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their organization, the coalition they're working with. And yeah, so whoever would like to take it away, whoever feels like an eager beaver, so to speak, feel free to jump first. I'll mute myself.
Sure, I can start us off. Hey everyone, my name is Melanie. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm here with the Queer APIMEDA Coalition. It stands for Asian, Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, and Desi American. And so what we do, we are a program of San Diego Pride, and we want to empower our APIMEDA community and also include all parts of the APIMEDA community, and some API spaces might not always. And so we do that through coalitions building and events, programming, educational, and like social events. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here with all of you.
Yay, so excited to be here with you, Melanie. My name is Yuan. My pronouns are she and they. I'm one of the co-directors at APIENC, formerly known as APIEquality Northern California. We are based on Ohlone land here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we primarily do our work through organizing. So we are a group of trans and queer Asians and Pacific Islanders here in the Bay, working for healing and healing justice, for real community safety, and for growing more sustainable and intersectional movements. I'm really honored to be here with Mel and with Jess today, and with my team. Thank you all. I'll pass it to you, Jess.
Hi, yeah, my name's Jess. Nice to see y'all. Well, mostly panelists. I can't see the audience, but guessing y'all here. Hello. My name's Jess. My pronouns are they, them. I am the lead organizer at APIEquality LA. Specifically, the organization is currently on Tongva and Quixtlan, which is also known as Los Angeles. Our main mission is to build power within the QTAPI community within the area. Specifically focusing within mental health for our main campaign called, forgetting the campaigns now, Community Care. Thank you. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll pass it on back to my team.
Thank you. I appreciate the pass back. It's very groovy. I feel like the energy already is very, well warmed, and everyone's doing super great work, it sounds like, in their respective communities. So I have lots of good warm tinglies going on right now. So that's very exciting for me. I hope you all are as well. So hello to the others that have joined on now. So let's go ahead and just start off. And so the first question is going to be open to whoever would like to pick it up. Maybe not Mel, since Mel was an eager beaver last time. Give someone else the opportunity. I mean, if someone else wants to, of course, not saying who should. But so for our first question we have, what is a memory of from your childhood that you think back fondly on in relation to your gender identity?
I'll go ahead and jump. To be honest, I can't think of anything that's fondly, I'm not trying to be like a downer, but that's just kind of the reality of my gender identity and how gender was kind of how it was centered within the areas I grew up. I don't remember any that are fondly. I think I remember more you consider childhood like early 20s or something like that. I do remember being, when I've tried presenting in different ways, or when I've tried different pronouns, just because it took me a while to settle on they, them for a number of years. Just kind of a lot of support and a lot of care and a lot of people that gave me space within that. Yeah, I don't know. I think for gender identity, it was something that I was able to come into more later years when I was in my 20s. A lot from my childhood, I remember a lot of shifting through sexual orientation, which I remember receiving a little bit more support on. Gender identity was just kind of far out of scope at the time. It was kind of hard to focus on both at the same time, to be honest.
It definitely doesn't have to be a font, like the reality is the reality. So, we all had our experience with gender identity growing up. So I appreciate your honesty on that. Did anybody else have anything else they'd like to share on that one? Feel free not.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jess. And it's very real to like not have words and like um, tools to name those experiences and like what that meant to you at that time. Because my story that I thought of when I saw this question is kind of like that, where back then it seemed like I was just like kind of talking back to my mom. And then now it kind of fits more into who I am. And the story that came to mind was like me being at Ross, like the Dress for Less place with my mom and picking out shoes and clothes. And my mom telling me those are like boyish shoes. And I would argue with her. And I was like, clothes and fabric don't have like a gender. They are pieces of cloth made from somewhere and they don't like I didn't know at the time, but now I'm looking back at that memory and I had enough words to say that. Um, and so it's just funny, like looking back on it, how that's like me advocating for how I identified at that time and how my body felt and how I viewed things as non-binary at the time, even if I didn't have the word non-binary in my vocabulary. So yeah, that's kind of what my thought was.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, it's definitely one of those things where, we develop the language and the understanding of language, or, however we see things in the world from our family, kind of, right? And like the community around us and how we're able to grasp those and kind of, communicate from those things we get. And so that kind of leads into the other question that we have going forward, which is, growing up, how did your family's perspective on identity aid or hinder your own development of your gender identity? And again, like that can be a negative, that can be a positive. It could be, neutral. I mean, for me, I definitely know that, that was something that affected me coming from a Latin background in which, the machismo was a big part of the culture. So, and being macho. So I don't know if anybody has any familiar experiences.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, y'all. I really appreciate hearing about that. I actually did have a memory actually while I was listening to both of you of being a child. And I remember there was a time where we were having a few friends of my parents over at our house, and I really liked when I was a little kid to go into the bathroom when my parents were distracted, and I would put on nail polish and I would put on my mom's lipstick, and then I would just wash it all off in the bathroom. I was probably like 5 or 6 years old, and then come back out again. And I remember that day that another person walked into the bathroom and came in and they started laughing, but I think they're also really uncomfortable. And and then everyone came over to see what the commotion was. And I remember feeling really embarrassed as a kid. But to be honest, right now, when I look back on that, I look back at that version of myself really fondly. I'm like, even though that was a hard memory, and wasn't something that I would wish on anyone's child or not, I'm like, wow, you were so, you were just experimenting and getting to know yourself even before you had language for that. But I think that memory just reminds me a lot of the way that, yeah, my family navigated experimentation or just growing and trying things while I was growing up. To be honest, I'll say, like, I don't know if my parents have a really strong perspective on identity. Like, I don't think it's something that's very important to them, even though it impacts them. I know that when I was growing up, my parents were really worried about working enough so that, we had enough money to pay for our basic needs, and just navigating being the only people in their huge extended families to be on this continent. And I think those were the things that were really important to them. But yeah, I will say, I think it's only been in the past few years that I've even really been able to like broach some of these conversations with people in my family. And even though like this is my I'm thinking about whoever might be watching, like, even though this is my full-time work, these are not conversations that I have easily or even very openly with my blood and my given family. So I think it's been a big journey.
Anybody else have anything to add to that? That was really well said. It was well crafted. So that was beautiful. Look at that. Another quiet moment. Those are my favorite moments of everything in life, to be honest with you. We had, just for those who, are just now joining or who have been watching along, just Mel here, they have some parakeets, it sounded like, or parrots floating around behind them. And so we were getting some bird songs a little bit ago. It was pretty nice. That would have been nice in that little bit of a moment right now. So I'm actually going to give it a little bit of a shift now, and I'm going to take it to like speaking about the work we do within our specific regions. We are all located kind of like in different parts. We're all California based, San Diego here. I was also from San Diego, and so Yuan and Jess, you're more mid to then upper side of California, Northern California. And so spatially, we all experience different experiences because of the areas we're around. And so I'm just curious, do we see any sort of different experiences, or do we hear different experiences from the people we talk to and the ones we love surrounding, either their transgender, their not gender nonconforming side of their life, or, like just their part of being the API community, and facing with the shifting, political polarizing battlefield that is being here in the United States at the current moment, or being in California. Again, that's, feel free anyone to pick that up. Sorry to hard left it there, to a little bit of a deeper subject, but give it some room. Oh, my heart. Okay, let's think. So in the last year, do you feel as if your safety has heightened, like your fear of safety for you or your loved ones have heightened surrounding either parts of your identity? And if so, do you think that one of those is more so than the other? I would say, not to say that one's more important, obviously, but just like, we live dual lives, right? As far as like at the intersection of our identity. So we experience, as individuals, we're going to experience double the traumas, unfortunately. Is that something you've seen within the last year? Or do you feel as if, shift the question and, use this as a moment to be able to amplify something else if you feel fit? I'm open to whatever interpretation we need for the question.
Yeah, I can speak to this a little bit. Obviously, with COVID and the rise in like anti-API violence, um, in San Diego, we felt, which is on community land, I did not mention that earlier. We Queer APIEMEDA was part of starting the San Diego API Coalition, and so we signed on with like 70 organizations, either serving the API community or allies, to denounce API hate. And the San Diego API Coalition continues to exist from around May of last year. And so that was the space in which we felt compelled to take action. And so one of the APIMEDA members is the founder of that API coalition and like that statement. And because, we can't just not have a coalition of our community, we felt like it was time. And it just happened to be that the violence surrounding COVID was what propelled us to do that. And the coalition meets to do different things, like talk. Right now, we're talking about redistricting, and how that impacts our Asian communities, and queer communities, and how they can be divided up within a region. And so that's kind of where we've been at and that's where I've experienced that. And for myself, speaking like only from the last 3 or 4 years that I've identified as queer, all of this organizing, specifically within this community, is still like pretty new to me.
Yeah, appreciate you for sharing that, Mel, and Martin for giving us a lot of space with that question. You had asked if our fear for our own safety or our people's safety has increased in the past year. I think there are definitely moments where, like, if I was going to tell you I didn't feel afraid or that my fear didn't spike, I'd be lying to you. But I will also say that one of the most painful parts about witnessing this rise of attention and violence towards Asian people in the past year has been how familiar it feels. Um, for example, and I really don't want to draw any comparisons, and also want to give a content warning that I won't talk in any detail, but we'll share some instances of violence against Asian folks in the past year. Um, when those 6 Asian women in Atlanta were killed earlier in March, it was so painful to witness from afar for so many reasons. But I think one of them was like, I woke up that same day and felt the same devastation and confusion and isolation and fear that I felt a few years ago when I woke up to the news of the Pulse massacre. A similar situation where people in their place of work and people in their place of joy and connection and pleasure were had their lives ended or disrupted in that way. So I think that, you know, this has been a part of the conversation for a few months, and I'm sure Melanie and Jess have thoughts about this, but I think an edge that we are growing as a movement of trans and queer API people and API people in general is being able to identify that this violence has been around for a long time, long before people started to pay attention to it. And it doesn't just look like instances of individual violence, but I know, like, our friends at the Asian Prisoner Support Committee have been fighting really hard to get people to recognize deportations as a form of violence against our people. So yeah, I think it's been a year of I think it's important for us in our spaces to be clear about the way that we tell the story of what's happening this year to do justice to the people who are experiencing this harm.
Let us happen. And thanks, Melanie, for like those answers, especially just kind of like it's a large question. I was kind of like sitting with it, also thinking about the previous question about kind of like my own family's perspective. And I mean, I think, yeah, like with the intersecting identities that we hold, like safety is kind of a thing that's on mine. And I think specifically that's been like on my mind specifically when considering safety and in intersections of being like QTAPI. Something that really struck me, especially specifically the events that Ewan mentioned that happened back in March, was I went through the same motions, like feeling that just like dread, like the knot in your stomach. It was really familiar to how, you know, gender violence. I lived on military bases a majority of my life, and I lived in Okinawa, which is the indigenous land of the Shimanchu people. And gender violence was just very common. Like the events that happened in March, that was something that I heard about constantly all the time. Like there were so many different events, so many for all my own family members. But something I was really kind of angry about from, you know, my own experience of like navigating gender identity in that space when I was a kid and hearing about what happened back in March was like how binary gender the conversations were. There was such a large gap about like when people were talking about the violence directed at those women, and there was just such a large gap of not addressing the violence that the QTAPI community have gone through. Like this is not new violence whatsoever. There was just such large gaps, and I remember feeling really angry. Like I feel like people were just kind of like ignoring like that intersection of identity. We're ignoring those like specific experiences, and it was kind of, I don't know, it was really just made me really angry. Like I didn't really feel like there was a space to mourn as like someone who's QTAPI, specifically the experiences that we face of gender violence. There's intersections, but there's also differences if you know, if you are like TGNC API. But I don't know, I feel like that. I feel like I've been able to feel a little bit more safer due to my own home situation and a lot of the ties that I've like have through APIEquality LA. I actually started at this or right when COVID hit, but through that I was able to build a lot of relations. But I feel like in conscious of safety, I just feel a lot more anger because I think this last year it's really shown the gaps about what sort of gender violence people are willing to focus on and how much space there's not given, how much resources, how much time. And it bothers me still to this day. And yeah, I feel like that's kind of like what sticks in my mind, especially with just kind of like my own experiences with gender violence and within a military colonized situation. Pass it back to Martine.
Enjoy when you pass it back. It's like a nice little soft pass. I feel the love. I appreciate all that. I thought that was important to kind of note on, and touch on as far as we all met up before this obviously and had a conversation for those who were not privy to that. And so these wonderful individuals have beautiful brains. I just want to share that. I think it's also important to note. So yeah, very groovy people. So thank you for being very honest and transparent about your experiences. So now we're going to shift into talking kind of like a little bit about what you touched on just there, as far as the binary instance in which, you see and we observe things in our world and we look at whether that's trauma. I was reading some data earlier from the state of California with regard to something, and it was, on a binary system where it was not, including, anybody that's part of the QT or TGNC community, right? And so it's very limited in the way that we're examining and being able to disperse, much needed funding, right? And because we're essentially not collecting data on a whole community, so we're ignoring their needs. And that's just was kind of an annoying thing as I was reading that. So, but separate from that, the next question we have is, throughout history, we have found that there are various cultures that have understood multiple and recognized multiple gender identities, and that were beyond the binary that were presented in Western culture. Apologies. How do you feel colonialism has lent itself to the erasure of gender identity and bolstered how it is presented in modern time as a new fad, so to speak? Because, that's the great thing. Oh, this is a new fad, expressing gender identity, using different pronouns, not only being representative of what we examine to be acceptable for gender identity, or people and their lack of understanding between sex and gender identity, for that matter, right? I don't know if anybody has any hot topics on this they'd like to pick up, but feel free to pick that mic up. I can do Mario hold music also if we need that, because earlier I started doing what I was told might be Pokemon. So do. To the wonderful people watching, if you'd also like to send some questions in, or send some love for our wonderful panelists tonight, it's always nice to send that in the comment section.
I'm happy to share some thoughts, some thoughts to start.
Yes,
and I'd love to hear
course.
what y'all got to say too. Yeah. The first day that I was ever involved with APIENC was the first day of my summer organizer program, and I came in as like a youth apprentice in 2018. And I had no idea what to expect, but I came in and it turned out to be a teach-in on identities and gender experiences beyond our binary that have existed in Pacifica and in Asian cultures for centuries before colonialism. And has anyone here learned about those things in school? I don't know. I did not, at least. And it really blew my mind because, just because I never known that history before. But I think something that a mentor and a friend of mine said that has stuck with me so firmly is that when colonial forces arrived in so many of the places that our communities, that APIENC's members hail from, it was trans people who lived beyond the gender binary, who were the first point of target, who were the first point of attack. And that was no coincidence. That happened tactically because we were often the ones who were healers. We were often the ones who held the spiritual fabric of our communities. We're often the ones who held our people together. And so by destabilizing, disrupting our lives and our role in our communities, they could disrupt our communities as a whole. And I think that is an incredibly sad history to think about. But just as we always talk about, we have never stopped existing despite despite colonialism's best efforts, right? Like, we are here and we have been here for generations and centuries. And I do think it is relevant to our lives today because even, on Turtle Island here on this continent, the existence of trans people is so often used as a wedge for our assailants to take freedom from other people, right? Like, so many examples of bills and laws that have been proposed where to support justice and to advance racial justice and gender justice in public spaces, where the issue of supporting trans folks or trans folks in bathrooms or trans folks getting employment or trans folks being recognized and safe has been the thing that has destroyed the entirety of those proposals or those bills. And so, we continue to be, even though now we are fighting for our place as to be recognized, as linchpins and as significant and even as sacred members of our broader communities, we continue to be used as wedges to divide and to defeat us. So I think that history, even though it's not quite exactly the same, it's still really relevant for our lives today.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. That was very just made me feel very nicely settled in a lot of ways. Because it's kind of weird. Like, the erasure didn't work. We're still here. And that's kind of weirdly beautiful. Something I guess I can kind of speak more from knowing my own identity and my own history as a Shimanchu person from the Diku Kingdom. Something that, I guess, really quick context, that the Shimanchu people, even culture before colonialism, it was weirdly binary. It's kind of weird. But something that I found really beautiful within the Shimanchu TGNC community is how my community has taken gendered traditional practices, things that have been used to be oppressive, or they were twisted for colonialism to be more oppressive. They're taking those gendered practices and claiming them as their own and making them more expansive, making them places of healing and stuff. Something that was really beautiful for me was a tradition within Shimanchu culture is specifically for women and femmes to get hand tattoos on their hands and on their arms to signify large major events in their lives. Some of them were marriage or whatever, but something that I find really beautiful that's being led by TGNC, QT, Shimanchu people, is they have been switching what these tattoos mean for different life accomplishments, I don't just not just marriage or not just very gendered, and that's something that I've had to grapple with a lot. Is I've kind of grappling from being TGNC from a culture that is very binary, even indigenously. And I think I find it really beautiful that I feel more comfortable possibly getting those tattoos on my own and not feeling some weird oppressive gender and stuff like that. So I don't know. I feel even in communities where there was a history from indigeneity or beyond that, where there were very gendered practices, I find it really beautiful that at TGNC communities, from my experience, Shimanchu have been expanding that and claiming it as their own. So I don't know. So it's something kind of that really inspires me usually. Oh, there's hope. Great. Colonialism hasn't won. So I'll leave it at that.
Yes, that was beautiful. I agree. Colonialism hasn't worked. And I think that's the tattoo sentiments is a gorgeous thing to think about as far as progression of one's own perspective of their own culture and the meaning behind it. So I mean, I like that you acknowledge that for you yourself, it it's comforting to know that and understand that, so that it doesn't feel as if you're putting something that would otherwise be seen as oppressive of how you see yourself to others, right? Just because it would be visually recognized for something. So I thought that was very beautiful. I wanted to point out that Wilson Ding sent us a heart, which I thought was super sweet, sending some love our way. So yay, thank you. So yes, I would love to shift it over now to, we have a pre-registered audience question from someone who's going to join us now, who I will let them introduce themselves, and then they can, feel free to jump in with their question as they see fit. So Leah, hello, hi. Are you there with us?
Hello, yes, I am. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, hi. I'm a Southeast Asian American trans man, and seeing this event come to fruition means a lot to me. I guess my question and sentiments was that growing up, I've noticed a lot of the transphobia I've faced can't be divorced from my identity as an API person. There are so many stereotypes of like trans people that become even more harmful if they intersect with an API identity, such as if people demonize API people as, evil and primitive, they're going to demonize and distrust a trans API person even more. And at the same time, the intersection between being API and trans is not all negative. As we've discussed before, there are so many cultures where before colonization and Western imperialism, they've traditionally recognized trans people and genders outside of the two binary genders. And I can find strength in knowing that many ethnic groups, including my own, traditionally accept trans people and that transphobia is a new concept. So, there's a mix of positive and negative things. I guess my question was just a simple opening up into how does being API intersect with the panelists' trans identities? Like, what things do you feel as a trans person you've experienced that have kind of been like inherently interwoven and unable to be divorced from your API identity?
Thank you, Leah. That was a very profound statement you had on yourself. Well stated. You got some claps in the comment section. Put this up.
Thanks, comment section.
So whoever would like to answer, take a moment to think about it, feel free to tag in whenever you have your thoughts gathered. I'm going to, as we take a few moments to gather our thoughts, I'm going to be putting inside the chat box each organization, coalition that's here with us today's website, so you can visit and find out more about the work that they're doing. Also, feel free to support them in the work that they're doing. That's always nice to do. And then I'm also going to be putting Trans Family Support Services website down there. We ourselves, we do trainings and we support the trans and gender nonconforming community throughout the nation. We're San Diego based, so for those who are unfamiliar joining us today. So feel free to check those out once they hit the comment section. I highly, highly, highly encourage it. So let's see.
It took me a minute, but I think I kind of have like an answer in terms of I guess in words, in like language. In Filipino, like there's no he or she, there's they, which is sha. It's SYA, and like there are nouns that are gendered, like mom and dad, and like older brother or sister. But if you're referring to like a person that's within your vicinity, you say that person. So you say sha, and so like my parents coming to the US, I've always struggled with like using the right like pronoun for a person. And it's just interesting that our language doesn't actually have the pronouns, which is why they get confused. Um, and so to me, it's interesting that the language itself isn't coded in that way, which speaks to like the traditions like before all of these other like colonizers came and like said this is how you should say like a parent. should be mom and dad instead of just parent, and your cousin should be male or female instead of just like cousin. And a sibling should be this or that versus just sibling. And it's kind of like what came to mind for me, where that's like not separable for me, because for my parents it's already very difficult, and I think it says a lot to like the traditions that were here before. Um, and like Yuan and Jess said, it just didn't work, and we're still here, and there's something like really beautiful about that.
I can jump in. Thanks, Mel, for like saying all that. I don't know. I guess it's weirdly like, especially like when you kind of like explained or like mentioned how it was really comforting to know that like, colonizing didn't work. There were many people before us who like lived and passed on what we know now. Something when I first was kind of like, I don't even know, learning or just becoming more aware, but like when I learned that there were other, like in this case, like API cultures, that TGNC people were leaders, and we existed, that I feel like that clicked in my mind so easily because of like specifically my Shimanchu identity, where it's really common to like, we do a lot of our holidays, a lot of our practices are really based on ancestors. Like I am never alone. I am always with ancestors, whether that's like during specific like times of the year, or if I go to specific locations, or if I want to talk to them. But like I've always, through my like Asian identity, I've always grown up knowing that like I'm never really alone. Like even if I've never met certain people, I never met for a long time another QTPI person, like I knew I wasn't alone. Like that was for a long time before I actually met someone who was QTPI, which is a long time because I grew up on Camp Pendleton near San Diego and a lot of military bases. It was really, I didn't feel as lonely, kind of like having and growing up with a connection of like ancestors through like my Asian identity. Like I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I didn't feel as lonely because of growing up with like knowing there were people before me. Like, I don't know if I explained that really right, but I don't know. Something kind of made me consider, because like, especially growing up in America, just kind of like seeing how like ancestors kind of navigated and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, this is such a personal and lovely question, so I will also answer. But thank you, Jess and Melanie, for sharing that. I don't have a really big answer about being Asian and trans. Also, like I think all three of you have spoken to, like Asian and Pacifica are both huge terms. I mean, like so many different kinds of people, but I guess I'll just share like a little experience or a little story. I do think that there is a perception I run into a lot among uh, Asian and Pacifica people, and also people who are not Asian and Pacifica, that transphobia or queerphobia has like been a part of our cultures, all of our cultures, for a long, long time. And I don't want to say like our cultures have always been perfect. Like that's not what, I don't think that's what any of us are trying to say. But I also don't think that that's true. Like I don't think that's a fully true story. And I just think about my my grandmother, whenever I would come home as a teenager with nail polish and lipstick and maybe, wearing some really, I don't know, feminine clothing, whatever made me feel good, my parents would be really, angry or embarrassed or react really strongly. And my grandmother would just look at me and say, you look so beautiful, or I love you, that color. And she did not go to like she had school until elementary school and then stopped going to school, and grew up in a small village. Like it's not because of like growing up in the United States. It's not because she went to like a fancy college that she has those ideas. Like I think that the ways that we have treated each other are more expansive than stories of colonialism give us room to believe. And I think that's just one of those experiences that I had that showed me that. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you all for, wow, for such meaningful answers. I'm getting a little bit emotional here. And yeah, thank you for sharing your experiences. Like, I wasn't even thinking about the linguistic aspect and how beautiful it is that that's carried on until modern day. Like, I come from a Filipino ethnic minority where there's a gender neutral word for older sibling still. And there's a gender neutral word for grandparent still. And also, Yuan, what you were saying about your grandma reminded me of my grandma who recently passed, who also like never misgendered me ever. Like, she didn't have a hard time coming, to terms with me being trans at all. And yeah, thank you all for sharing your perspectives. It means a lot to me.
Thanks so much for asking and sharing that with us.
Oh, you're making me very teary-eyed right now. So I'm like, it's very beautiful. So Leah is always an amazing person to have in your presence. So thank you for asking your question today. And, for those that aren't familiar, our panelists are, but Leah is the person who essentially drove forward this idea to have this conversation and, was very patient with us and, just very open and honest and transparent. So I wanted to say a huge thank you to them. And I really appreciate you coming out and speaking up today and, being as front facing and forward as you feel comfortable. So thank you for that. So I'm going to take you off the stream for now. And then just know later on, I'm going to give you a huge virtual hug after this. So it'll be a for sure thing.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So now that we're all, filling in our emotions and, kind of like, having that moment of, this is what it is. For those who have never participated in a live stream with me before, it's heavy. It's heavy. Yeah, we do that, I think it's important to really pull forward and, kind of really talk about these parts and stuff, I try to take everything that we do here with an intersectional lens. I, as a person, am very big on intersectionalism. And so, reaching out and being able to have this dialogue was super important. And I wanted to make sure that I tied in some things that are also super important just from, the work that we're doing here at Trans Family Support Services is, another thing that I wanted to bring up was just about, we all within the community of the QT or TGNC community, as I picked up Jesse. So, but, those in the community, again, it's about speaking to our own experiences if we feel comfortable or speaking to shared experiences we may have experienced with those we love, be that, our trans siblings or, just family members who we know who are experiencing issues with this. But the tune is into healthcare. And so talking about healthcare and the healthcare system, we do a lot of insurance work. And so we deal with a lot of really complicated insurance styles for some really frivolous, silly stuff. That is how I'm going to put that, which is stopping trans youth from being able to get gender affirming care, stopping trans adults from being able to get gender affirming care, which is essentially a form of suicide prevention. And so, I think for me, the important thing to talk about is, do you personally know anyone that has, gone through the process of denial or when seeking gender affirming care, or do you yourself have had that experience? And how do you feel that that affected you yourself personally or the people you know? Again, open ballpark question, but, feel free to take it how you see and swing.
I don't like going. I'll just speak to my own experience because I don't know about boundaries of people who I know personally. But for my own experience about just like generally seeking gender affirming healthcare, it's weird. It's weird how it's weird how like signing up for healthcare is like one of the least gender affirming things usually, and it's like the first thing that you do in the process. I think it really speaks to how like, gender affirming care shows up in many different ways, whether that's like for me in this case, because I haven't really gone for my healthcare beyond this because I only recently got it after this experience. But like when I was first signing up for healthcare, it was not gender affirming immediately because of like, you know, how I was supposed to like say gender identity or sex assigned at birth. It was only a sex assigned at birth question, and everybody knows, you know, the baggage that comes with that. But something that kind of came from it was like, since I didn't answer the question, or like I left that question blank because I didn't want to answer it, I ended up actually not having healthcare for a year, and this was during COVID. So because of this one question that I didn't answer because I didn't want to, and because, you know, it wasn't gender affirming care where like I didn't have anybody who followed up with me, because I didn't answer this one question, I didn't have healthcare for the first year of when we were in lockdown. So it was kind of very like weird experience of like, it's weird how like gender affirming care comes up, I guess. Like it can come up in just the forms that you sign, the people who you interact with, the bedside manner, and all that kind of stuff. So I'd say that was my experience of denial that kind of comes up more immediately, especially because of how it really like, you know, it really dictated how I was present within lockdown and COVID and stuff, like knowing that I didn't have healthcare because of this one little thing. So I don't know. I wish forms weren't as complicated, but they really are for some reason, and it's very tiring.
We're in 2021. You would think by now it would just be like 3 check boxes and like, I don't know, a blood sample or something. Like, I don't know, something wild like that. I will note though, just from like my perspective, like that I have fully not gone to companies before because they only have binary gender markers. And it's like a huge turnoff because for me, it speaks to like how my service beyond that form may look. So like, I really appreciate you bringing that up because, even flying recently, I've flown more, and like marking one or the other rather than what I am is really uncomforting. And you know, like it's outdated, you know, like there's a sense of understanding, but there's also a sense of like still asserting myself and my identity, right? And like that's kind of, so yes, all about that. Snaps to the gods for that one. So did anybody else have any other experience or anything like that? You know, we don't have to take too much time on this one here. We've taken a lot of heavy other questions. So
I mean, my short answer is yes, for sure, 1000%. I think the denial in this question can look like a lot of things. Like for me, you know, especially when I was in a part of my gender transition where I had very little support, it would take me a really long time and a lot of willpower to need to go to necessary doctor appointments. And I do not think that I'm the only person with that experience because it's terrifying. Yeah, it's terrifying to be treated so badly by people who are supposed to care for us. And so for anyone here who's listening to this, who's had that experience, like, been there, affirming you. You don't deserve that. You deserve better. And also just say, like, I know this is a question for us, but it really makes me think of 2 years ago, we did a survey of about 200 trans API people in the Bay Area around healing, safety, housing, a lot of different things. And almost half of our respondents, more than 40%, said that they felt uncomfortable and unsafe going to the doctor. And that is absolutely an unacceptable state for our healthcare system to be in, not to mention how many people in our community straight up do not have access to healthcare or cannot afford the care that they need. So I definitely think that this is a very common challenge for a lot of folks in our community and is a fundamental human right that we deserve to struggle for and win.
there was more snaps to the gods for that statement. That was great. So that was a battle cry I'd go into war for. That was for sure. Mel, did you have anything you'd like to add to this before we move to our closing question?
Yeah, I think just like really briefly, you know, to the reasons that Yuan and Jess have already spoken to. The farthest I've gone for like seeking gender affirming healthcare is like getting a chest binder, but through like actually trans family, through like the center. And so it was through a grant that they have. And that's like the safest I've felt like approaching somebody to figure out like, you know, my dysmorphia with my body. And so I haven't even like gone as far as like wanting to check a different box. And, you know, Martin, when you like talked about like just checking a box when you like select a flight, it's just so daunting that like that's just a day-to-day norm, and not just in healthcare. I don't want to like sidetrack us too much, but just even like a person that's taking your coffee order at a shop, and how just in so many spaces we constantly can't feel like we can't advocate for ourselves, to affirm who we are, um, let alone like a system. Sorry, let alone a whole like healthcare system that's supposed to be caring for your health. Um, so yeah, that's kind of as far as I've gone in seeking that care.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note, like you were saying about, like, like a lot of people don't understand that even seeking out a binder is gender affirming care, in the process and the hurdles that some people go through to have to, you know, get a binder. We deal with the work we do at Trans Family Support Services, usually a majority youth-based. And so, we're dealing with kiddos who are wanting to see if that's going to be something that's going to be affirming, and, having to jump through the hurdles of having a very uncomfortable conversation with their parents where their parents may not be very, affirming themselves. And then, those kind of situations. And so I'm happy to hear that you're able to get set up at the center though with something. So that's awesome. But yeah, I definitely agree. I think that it's super disarming. I present pretty often as what I would say is a mask individual, but that is definitely not how I feel most of the time. I'm very feminine. And so for that reason, I get misgendered quite often. And it's constantly a conversation with myself with the understanding that, in the conversation with others at the same time, that gender markers do not identify gender identity. And, it's like the reprogramming ourselves to remember that, and constantly having these conversations that, and then it's also like the inner conversation with yourself sometimes about insecurity with, like, am I presenting hyper masculine or hyper femme, in a means to appease others rather than myself. So there are so many things that go on in a day-to-day, let alone trying to check a checkbox for one or the other on a healthcare form or any form for that matter. So I'm happy we all have that in common for the most part, though. I feel like we just bonded. Ooh, look at us. So our last question for the evening, and thank you for all those who have been watching this evening. It's been really great to have people joining in with us. And we got a couple little bit of a heart care emojis, it looks like, on Facebook. And so it looks like a groovy time. So, close this out with kind of like, just a question of like, how can we do more, right? Like, what can we do specifically within the community and outward to the community? So I'm going to read the question as written, and then we'll like break it down because I wrote these way too analytically. So let's go ahead and go through this. So how can TGNC API folks build and organize power within their communities? And what can those that are not of the API or TGNC communities do to support those who are? So how do we build political power and community power within the API community? And then how, for those who are not a part of that community or part of the TGNCQT community, how do you know? Like, so whoever wants to swing on this one again too, I mean, feel free. Are the parrots still there, by the way, Mel?
I don't think so.
Did we scare them away? Oh. I mean, like, for one way, for me, from an outside perspective, that I know that I support as an ally to communities is I give funding as much as I can. I know for me that one of the most important things that I've been able to do, and I'm super thankful, and I remind myself monthly, is that I try and do recurring donations to smaller coalitions and different organizations. And it means to be able to continue to grow that people power. I would imagine a lot of the funding that comes in is for you to redistribute back into the communities that you work with. And so for me, that's how I would look at one way that I as an ally can support. I mean, another way I look at is through legislative actions, trying to support actions that come out of the community rather than creating or signing on to policies that weren't created of the community, I guess is kind of what my comment with that was. So I don't know if those are any suggestive Johns to the conversation. Ooh, look at me, John's work. You're going to just get comedy if you just, are really bad puns.
I think speaking for myself, like support looks like learning and it looks like accountability. It like you're willing to learn over a period of time, and I will stop teaching you at a certain point because you can teach yourself. Um, but obviously also like with compassion, asking with intention. And to me, that's what support has looked like since I've come out as like non-binary with my friends in the last year. And seeing them correct themselves and asking questions about other parts of like being trans or non-binary or non-conforming has come up, and that's always been like really heartwarming. Or them correcting each other when they're in a group space. um, and yeah, I think amplifying voices is super important. Just uplifting one another when we're in spaces like this, or seeing like a scholarship that you think like another person who's in the community would like benefit, because we need to redistribute like wealth that has like that has not been like given to our community and like our people. And as far as like building and organizing, I think those can be really daunting words. And like at the baseline, it's like finding a social space and then finding friends within that space, like chosen family in a lot of like, LGBT plus spaces. And that can lead you to like those actions that you like mentioned in terms of like, legislative action. And if they have the privilege and the access to money to like donate, then it's, and like like just for me, the baseline is defining a space, whether it be a social thing or a like political space, or some kind of professional space that allows you to like your boss will allow you to like take this training and take that course, and that can help you build something. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. You sound like a community organizer at heart, and that's beautiful. I love it. It's the heart song I love to sing. So did anybody else have anything else they'd like to add on to that beautiful message?
Yeah, I'll just kind of just echo what Mel said, which is like, I think like even for me, like when I first started advocacy and organizing is really scary, especially because I think a lot of people, if they want to get started in advocacy and organizing, a lot of people view it as like a solo journey, or like when you first start thinking about like, oh, I want to be involved in organizing and like advocacy, but like I don't know where to start. Like at the beginning, it can kind of feel like a solo journey, and it's like really daunting. I think like another way to think about it, just like find your people. Like I feel more like grounded and more like kind of willing to do advocacy work and like organizing, specifically within the Shimanshu TGNC communities, because like I've gotten to know my community more. Like, because to be honest, like what's gonna like have me be in like social justice movements for the longest time, it's not just gonna be like the end goal. Like I want like abolition. I want like our people to be treated like beyond basic decency, but for us to be like really happy. But the thing that really keeps me going are like the people who I know in this movement, the people who I can laugh or who I can like ask for support from. I think if you, as a API TGNC person, like if you want to be involved in advocacy and organizing, no matter what your goal is, what kind of work that you want to do, like just hang out with some people first. Find out if you'd like to talk to them beyond advocacy and organizing. Like I'm happy that I know some Shimanshu TGNC people who love to read books way too much and have a weird unhealthy relationship with Kingdom Hearts, even though the game series has not been treating us quite well the last couple of years. But so we're in Smash now, so I don't really know what to feel. Anyway, but things like that, because like organizing that advocacy, it's not just work, it's also like community, and it should be like that. That's what's going to keep you going. So yeah, find your people. look at all the orgs here. There are so many people here. I wish I knew about like San Diego Queer APIMEDA like coalition when I was living on Camp Pendleton, or just kind of knowing like people who were living there. Because like I grew up in San Diego for a good bit, didn't know who to talk to. Grew up in Orange County, didn't know who to talk to. Grew up in Riverside, San Bernardino, did not know who to talk to. Here's some people to look into. Like all these people are great. Please look in. It'd be so cool.
Yeah, that was so beautiful from both of y'all. I don't really have much to add. I don't have anything to add at all, actually. Yeah, come find us. We're here and like ready and excited to plug you into relationships that are hopefully transformative and fulfilling, and organizing to meet our needs. And not only that, but if you are a trans and queer Asian person, Pacifica person listening, we actively need you. Like to win the changes in our lives that we want and that we need, like we need you, and we need like your special gifts and your experiences, and really excited and hopeful that you'll join us.
Well stated from you all. Wilson sent in a last little tidbit of thank you all for sharing your powerful testimonies and storytelling. I think I agree, I echo that, and I think this was kind of a beautiful time. So I want to give everyone just an opportunity, excuse me, clear my throat. If there's anything else you'd like to shout out that your org or coalition is doing right now that you'd like to, kind of like just give a shout out to, or anything like that, feel free to say that now. Otherwise, we're going to close out for the evening.
Yeah, just really quick, Queer APIEMEDA, we kind of have like a monthly virtual mixer, and our next one's October 28th. And you can find that on our Instagram at APIEMEDA, QAPIMEDA, on Instagram. And yeah, we'd love to see people there. We have people that tune in from like all over the country, and it's just like a virtual space to be with like other queer APIEMEDA folks.
Y'all have so many fans out here. Look at this. So many people want to say thank you for creating this conversation. Thank y'all for this lovely panel. Thank you from Lay. Thank you from Anna. And thank you to everyone that was able to join this evening and, tune in as we had these conversations and, just vibed, honestly. That's what it's always about. So other than that, have a great rest of your evening. If you'd like to follow up with any of the coalitions that you saw today, they are inside the chat box of or the comment section of whichever platform you're watching on today. And feel free to check out that mixer that happens once a month. And otherwise, enjoy the rest of your evening and have a beautiful weekend.
Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
Love sharing the space with all of you.